actually vibing very high together because we officially started our year-long deep dive into Hellenistic astrology school yesterday. And one of the things that I love so much about the intro lecture was that he very specifically said that this is actually a deep dive not only into Hellenistic astrology, the roots and foundation of modern astrology as we know it, Western modern astrology, but how deep the roots are in ancient Indian astrology. And we both love Western and Eastern astrology, and so it just felt very like validating in that moment that it was like, okay, this is like where we're supposed to be because it's so representative of who we are and what we're interested in and what we're doing here with this podcast, this Soul Arcana podcast. And we're just so happy to be in time and space with you wherever you're at. So we'll take a moment just to drop in collectively all together. If you're in a space that's safe to soften or close the eyes completely, please do. Let your shoulders relax down your back. And because we are in this beautiful month of Cancer, the sun is in the sign of Cancer, and on tomorrow night into Wednesday, the moon will be in the sign of Cancer. It's a really watery element. So as you feel all of your energy, your physical body, your mind start to soften, allow your awareness to move up to the very top of your head. And start to imagine a waterfall pouring down the top of your head, the back of your neck, down your shoulders, all the way down your spine. Really cleansing and purifying all 5 layers of your being. Your physical body, your pranic emotional body, your mental body, the wisdom ancestral body, and the bliss body. Feel yourself being bathed by the waters of nature. Reminding yourself that you are a child of the stars, of the cosmos, of the earth, and that you are a micro of the macro. So all that which is being reflected outside of you is also occurring inside. So we call in our angels, our spirit guides, our ancestors, so that this conversation can be of benefit not only to you, Sydney, and myself, but for the entire collective. And so it is. Welcome, Sid.
Hi.
How you doing today?
Doing great.
It's kind of an emotionally imbalanced day.
It's dense, for sure. For sure.
I'm exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
I did a friend's 40th birthday girls weekend this weekend. Lots of sun, lots of heat, lots of pool water time, lots of wind, lots of nature, and not much sleep. And today, with it here in the Midwest, it's very gray, but humid and hot. And so we have a lot of like water, air elements present, which I think is interesting because in Western astrology, this new moon that's coming up on really tomorrow night into Wednesday is in the sign of Cancer, water, and in Vedic astrology, it's in the sign of Gemini, air. So it's like interesting to me that it's very humid and it's very windy. Like, how much more perfect reflection could that be? So I'm curious, how are you feeling?
I definitely felt foggy this morning. I think foggy is the best word I can use. It was very hard for me to wake up and actually be awake. I think it took 2 hours for me to be like, I still feel like I'm dreaming right now.
Same.
Yeah.
My daughter came in this morning, she's like, why are your eyes closed? And I'm like, I am so tired. I'm gonna blink my eyes because that was like a film almost. And it's interesting because today is literally what I wrote down for the cosmic report today. The very first word was fog, frustration, and the need for discernment. And today, on June 23rd, the sun is square to Neptune in Aries, and the moon is square to Mars in Virgo. And so this really is one of the most emotionally confusing days of the entire week. The Sun-Neptune square can distort reality, blur emotional boundaries, and stir feelings of delusionment. With Neptune in action, it's easy to romanticize self-sacrifice or fall prey to escapism. And when you pair that with the Moon-Mars square, and the mental and emotional landscape may feel really overstimulated or even agitated. And I felt that overstimulation and agitation today when I was writing this blog post and researching for this talk today, and my children were like asking me 5 million questions, and I just felt so overstimulated, and I felt so frustrated and agitated, and I'm like, okay, well, this is perfectly playing out. So as I tell my husband all the time, everything is written in the stars. And so with that, you know, we might have this feeling to be compelled to act or react before you feel fully grounded. And so like literally as I'm like towards my kids and writing this, I'm like, okay, just like ground yourself. Get them whatever it is that they need to get, give them the attention that they need, and then come back. So I felt like it was always this kind of like circling back, and when I felt myself getting angry or frustrated, it was just like, and that has helped. I'm curious how you feel in regard to like what we pulled today with the energy as before. Do you think we should go into that before or after we do the week?
I really think either way, it doesn't matter. I think you opened it up talking about the Neptune square, and I think it's so interesting because we brought in this new deck today, the Black Moon Astrology deck, next to my obviously just regular weight tarot deck that I did another pull for. So we have 2 cards today, and from the astrology deck, we actually pulled the Neptune card. And it really just says Neptune here and says sacrifice. And I think with its pairing tarot card here, we have the Judgment. And the Judgment card is, it's really a call to action. It's a call from the divine. And so I think paired with this Neptune card, it's asking us, what is it that we can let go of right now in order to become deeper in union with the divine? So
I love that you said the Judgment action because the moon is technically square Mars, which is like the planet of action.
yes.
Judgment. So how fantastic is that? I'm really curious about your take on tomorrow. It's a Jupiter Kazemi, which is just a really fun word to say. And basically what that means, you guys, is that it's a rare portal into abundance. It's when Jupiter is like in the heart of the sun. And it's really said to be the luckiest, most auspicious day of the year. And it's a year that creates this window of clarity where Jupiter's expansive, benevolent nature is really magnified and purified by the solar light. And so with this happening in Cancer, Jupiter's in Cancer, the moon is going to be in Cancer tomorrow. It's these themes of wisdom, growth, opportunity, and spiritual insight, and they're really filtered through this lens of emotional intelligence, ancestry, and inner nourishment. And that's really what I'm taking away from this whole entire week is this inner nourishment of taking care of your home, like your actual physical home and family life, but even deeper, taking care of your home, your body, your temple, of which we get the honor to live in every single day, and yet lack the care and nourishment that it should be getting. And so this is just a red alarm going off that says like, slow down, take care of yourself, and really relish in the significance it is to not do anything.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with everything you're saying. The one thing I want to touch on about this Jupiter Sun cazimi is what a cazimi is itself. This roughly translated what you said in the heart of the sun. That's an Arabic translation, roughly. So I think here, especially with this being in Jupiter, that it is an extremely auspicious time for us to prioritize growth on an interpersonal level.
I couldn't not agree with you more. It's like, it's interesting that you said that it's a loose Arabic translation, because the lecture was talking about really the kind of ability of astrology to live in the roots of where it came from was because it was translated from Greek to Arabic and then Arabic back to Greek into what we know now.
Right.
And so it's really interesting that tomorrow is the day where it's in the heart of the sun, and we can really thank Arabic translation for allowing that to come into this like modern realm of what we know of astrology today. And it really kind of serves to the point of what you said about like inner growth. It's like, what in us is needing to be translated into a space where we can expand and grow. There's so many like nooks and crannies inside of our own knowing that we are unfamiliar with, or we've like cut off really any sort of prana to those areas. And that is what this Kundalini practice that we'll be doing tonight, and those of you that want to practice it later on, I will be recording it and we can share that practice with you. But that's the whole idea, is like, where inside of your body is asking to be noticed and nourished, and where can you grow and expand, and where can you begin to translate how your body's feeling into how you're going to actually take action in allowing that to come to fruition.
I love it. I think the only other thing I want to say about the cazimi is I think it's important to note that what it is when you're thinking about it astrologically, or you're hearing the word cazimi brought up again, because it obviously is going to happen again, it's knowing that the planet and the sun are both in the same sign for a moment. And that's where the power really lies, is that both this planet and the sun are in conjunction in one sign, giving it extra power from that sign.
And we're in the sign of Cancer.
Correct.
Which Cancer, if you want to tell us a little bit about kind of the characteristics of Cancer.
We've been talking about this like kind of this week, about how Cancers are represented by the sign of the crab, and they have this really hard exterior but these soft insides. And so I think oftentimes when I think about a Cancer person or the Cancer people in my life that I know, they are the most deeply emotional signs and the most caring, nurturing signs, but they don't always come across that way at first. And so their emotions, much like a Scorpio, really lie beneath the surface of who they are. So when I think about that sign of Cancer, I think about, these beautiful emotions that are hidden and have hidden depths to them.
And it requires a sense of like willingness to dive deep into those waters. And that's what is really being asked of us, especially with Jupiter in Cancer, is like, are you willing to dive to the depths of self in order to tap into this well of truly unlimited abundance, prosperity, growth, expansion, joy, happiness, all of the things that the wonderful planet of Jupiter provides. But you have to kind of like hold your breath and dive deep and go to that place inside of you that allows you to experience and tap in. And I think a lot of people can't hold their breath that long, and then they start to freak out, and then they go back up to the surface they're out of breath, they feel fatigued and beaten, and then they escape. And I think that that's kind of what our society is in right now, is in this kind of like reoccurring escapism, and it's very surface and it's challenging. I think there's a community of people out there that are wanting to dive deep and they don't know how, and hopefully this podcast helps, guide the light to the depths. But once our society at large is able to go to those depths, we won't see a significant collective change if we're all just skimming the surface constantly.
Right.
It's interesting because I listened to this podcast about this guy who studied, I can't remember like what the law of one, I think is what it is. And he was talking about these channelers that channeled this entity from the planet Venus, and this entity's name was Ra. And they were talking about like the dimensions, and he had referenced the dimensions to the chakra system. And he was talking about like the root chakra, the sacral, and the solar plexus are kind of like the dimensions that we as physical humans like are able to tap into. And the Ra was talking about this fourth dimension of the heart. And this guy in the podcast was originally saying that is Kundalini awakening, when you can rise your energy up into the fourth dimension, into the heart chakra. And then that serves as a bridge into these other dimensions of the throat, the third eye, the crown, and beyond. And I thought it was really interesting because in yogic texts, it always talks about the heart as being this bridge between the physical and the non-physical. And it's interesting because you were talking about Cancer having this like soft interior, and that's almost like the Cancer, the crab itself is like has this rough exterior because it's like holding the heart of the cosmos almost. And then so right now there's no better time than to get into rise up into that like fourth dimension state. That's where Kundalini is so helpful, and Nidra meditation and slow flow practices and water rituals and all of these amazing things that you can do to tap into the power of what we're experiencing right now. And that really leads us into Wednesday's new moon in Cancer. And it's really like starting on Tuesday evening, going into Wednesday, and the moon will be in Cancer, and then the moon will be conjunct Jupiter in Cancer. And so Jupiter's really expansive light and this new moon is one of the most emotionally fertile and healing lunations of 2025, which makes me think like how many of us collectively and literally the earth herself, how much heart healing is needed right now. And so Wednesday is this really amazing time for us to really dive into that. The home sign of Cancer is the moon, and it feels held and intuitive and alive when it's in its home sign. And when it meets Jupiter, there is a sense of emotional generosity and a belief that your inner life matters deeply, and that tending to it does have tangible results. So this new moon really supports healing family wounds, reconnecting to your inner child or maternal line, establishing emotional boundaries rooted in self-respect, and planting intentions around safety, home, and emotional truth. Which I immediately my heart seizes up when I think about establishing emotional boundaries rooted in self-respect. That one is really tough for me, and I'm assuming most other people. So I think that's the one thing that we do a very good job of, is disrespecting ourselves. And what I mean by that is saying yes to everyone else, and in that saying yes, you're saying no to who you are.
That's so funny. I was having this exact kind of conversation with Andrew earlier in the week. And I think it's something that him and I, as Virgos, and the House of Service, we love to help people, but sometimes it's really at the cost of ourselves. So I couldn't agree more with everything that you're saying on the new moon. I think it really signifies this powerful time to manifest not only in the external sense, but even more so in the emotional and internal sense. It's a great time to tune into one's own inner world and to create a deep sense of home, really within the self. So with Jupiter's energy amplifying this moon, it gives even more power to our intentions. So I think even just letting these intentions be known to the universe in whatever way, just like you were saying with these different rituals, with journaling, whatnot, it's a really beneficial time for one to search for these deep emotional truths that are within. So I think, when we're reflecting upon this time, it's important to think about things such as, how do we want to feel internally on a day-to-day basis? How would we like to handle or present our emotions both to ourselves and to others? Those are huge things that I think about on a weekly basis. And I think even more so at this time, they are prevalent. And there's a lot of power behind moving through these difficult waters. Because sometimes we don't like to address maybe how we're handling things emotionally. Sometimes we're not even aware of how we are. But this would be a time to become aware.
To step into the light of
Right.
awareness. It is interesting because we have these emotional patterns that are ingrained in us in childhood, and this is the Cancer. It's like dive into these childhood wounds or ways that we've been conditioned to behave or repress our emotions. And you're so right, there's so many of us that don't even face our own emotional self. And is there a healthier way to express your emotions inside and outside of yourself? I think that's where these really incredible practices of Kundalini and yoga and pranayama and breath work can come in to play, because there are so many kriyas in particular and pranayama practices that help you release whatever emotion. I mean, you name it and the Kundalini practice has it. The kriya to remove fear, the kriya to conquer limiting beliefs, the kriya to overcome anxiety, the kriya to elevate your consciousness, the kriya to free your body from physical pain. Like, there's literally a kriya for everything. And what I find to be one of the most annoying things about tarot, astrology, Kundalini, is that they are so wildly misunderstood. And for whatever reason, it's been put, like, the biggest eye roll of all time has been put onto these ancient practices that we learned in our lecture the other day that predate 27,000 years ago, when our teacher was talking about this uterus-shaped stone that they found that's literally, I think he said, like 27,000 years old, and it is a lunation stone to track the menstrual cycle and the lunar cycle. And that just blows your mind. And it also just validates, in my eyes, all of these ancient practices that are now resurfacing. And it makes me excited, and it also makes me feel a responsibility to share these practices with the world at large, because they are so transformational. And people, I think, are so scared of them. It's like you say tarot, and people you think you're a witch,
Right.
Like you're crazy, they don't believe in it. You say Kundalini, and people literally turn and run as fast as they possibly can. And it's like, if we could collectively overcome these limiting beliefs, which has kind of been a thread of all of our podcast episodes episodes and really this thread, I think of the Aquarian age that we're in is innovation, of overcoming these beliefs that are limiting, that once we overcome them, then we liberate ourselves into these higher states of consciousness that our ancestors and the ancient people before us were understood with such depth and really with this sense of integrity. And it's like, I feel honored that we get to like forge this pathway back and forward into like what it'll look like in the future.
I love it.
So give me a little rundown of what Thursday the 26th will bring for us.
Sure. So on the 26th, we have Mercury entering the sign of Leo. So in essence, this is really adding a flair of both confidence and I think creativity when it comes to our communication style and even our mental processes. I do think though, this is a time that's important to stay grounded, and I want to use the word humble here as well. This energy being in Leo can sometimes bring about, a prideful and egoic shadow, and these tendencies can come up if we aren't mindful of the energies of the transits while they're happening.
I love that you said humble, because when you think of Leo, he's like kind of flamboyant energy, and to be humbled in that flamboyant energy is so needed right now, because we've got some days of watery introspection, and then the sky starts to heat up. We've got Leo and Mercury and both the moon, and really as Mercury enters the fixed sign of Leo, thoughts and communication become bolder, louder, and more self-assured. And this powerful moment, like you said, is for creative expression, it's for storytelling, it's for heart-centered speech, which then brings us back to this kind of heart dimension where we need to rise up individually into the heart space. And because we are a micro and macro, as we rise up into the heart space, then the world around us will start to reflect that energy as well. And this is really important also to talk about the shadow side, like you said, because Leo can really exaggerate and it can really crave validation. So the goal is to express from the heart, but not the ego. And that is a line that is very fine. And it's interesting because in Kundalini, there's a pose called, in kind of modern day Kundalini, it's called the Radiance Charger. And in kind of old Kundalini, it's called the Ego Eradicator. And it's like, you don't want to actually eradicate the ego completely, because it's, our personality, it's what drives us forward. But I remember my teacher giving the analogy of, you want the ego in the car, but you don't want the ego to have the keys. You don't want it to be driving the car. And I always think of that because we are such an ego-focused society, that what would happen if you lived your life for one day from the heart space? Like, how different and how much more rich would your life be if you let your heart lead first? And so you should play around as you're like building sequences for yoga.
Yeah.
Building sequences that lead from the heart. And that's a good way to kind of trick your students into practicing what it means to lead from the heart. Because it's like so easy to say, okay, today, see what it would be like to lead from your heart, without actually realizing it. But it's literally like, put your chest out first. And we've been talking about this a lot, and it kind of circles back into this whole vibe of Cancer, of this like protective shell. There's so many of us that have rounded shoulders, and we are protecting the heart space. And you have to have this ability or desire to dive into the depths of self, to like pull the heart up and forward and like literally pull your shoulder heads back and let your heart shine first. Instead of your ego walking into the room first, what would happen if your heart walked in first? And I can almost guarantee that the energy of the room and experience and situation would have a unconditional, non-judgmental air to it, as opposed to what the ego brings, which is constant criticism, judgment, doubt, comparison, the spiral that I think we're all spinning around in, and everyone is desperately trying to get out of, whether they're conscious of it or not.
Absolutely.
All right, so bring us into Friday.
Okay, Friday the 27th, we have the moon conjunct Mercury in Leo. So this is a true meeting of the heart, the moon, and the mind, which is Mercury. So it's making it a really easeful time to speak your inner truths. And I think that's funny because we're having this moon in Cancer that's really bringing those truths up to the surface. So I love how this week is kind of, going in this line of energy that is fluid.
Courageous communication. And it's interesting because the word courage, it literally means heart. And I had a teacher that said the opposite of love isn't like no love, it's fear. And in order to conquer fear, you have to embody courage, because it takes courage to overcome fear. And there is a lecture series that Jim Morrison did in like the 60s, and it's called The Mask. And in it, he has a quote that I actually have tattooed on me, and it says, "Expose yourself to your deepest fear. After that, fear has no power and you are free." And I think that speaks to what is happening in the cosmos this week, is expose yourself to those depths. And on the other side of that is everything that you've been seeking for. And one of my other favorite yogic quotes from the Vedas is that it says, "When you make friends with yourself, your soul is free. And when your soul is free, you realize everything you've been seeking for already lays in your own home."
I feel like everything you're saying right now is really what this judgment call of sacrifice is. It's sacrificing that part of yourself that you're the most afraid of in order to get to the other side, in order to actually meet your true self. Once those deluded ways of thinking kind of dissipate, especially the ways of thinking about yourself that might not even be true.
Isn't it interesting? Like, if you think about all of the untruths that you think of yourself, and this is a really good time for you to like really pull back the veil of illusion and realize the untruths that are being spoken, that you're speaking to yourself, and why, and really contemplating like, why am I allowing these to be true? It was interesting to be at this like weekend pool party, and how uncomfortable women are in their bodies, and how incredibly belittling women can be to themselves. And in the same breath, they're uplifting everyone around them. It's like, if you would just say what you're saying to everyone else to yourself. I think that's the hardest thing for most people. And what I think is also really interesting is like, we obviously know that women are judged by other women and also by the world, everyone in the world. But my husband they talk about this, you know, celebration of body image of women, and men just kind of like fall in the dark. And he's like, you know, where's the dad bod celebrating, you know, the other dad bod? And I think it's just a reminder that every single one of us has this egoic tendency to constantly criticize ourselves. And it's like we're uplifting other people because we won't allow ourselves to say it to us. It's like we don't believe it. But even when we were talking just before this podcast, and you're like, I'm practicing not saying and that, you know, you can't get better at it if you're not aware of it. And so if we could really use this month as a time to like practice this idea of like self-love to yourself and reminding yourself of all of the magnificence and brilliance and beauty that you hold within yourself, like crack the tough exterior and let yourself feel the amazingness that you are.
Yeah. That just really brings me back to what I was saying about finding, like how this is just an amazing time to find that home that resides within you. And making peace with it, making yourself comfortable there. Light a candle.
And love it. Like thank yourself for making it this far. We have all battled life day in and day out, and the fact that your body and your mind and your spirit have carried you up to this point is something to truly be celebrated. I also don't think it's ironic in any way that this Cancer sign, sun and new moon piggyback the solstice. Because the solstice is all about celebrating your maturity. It's about celebrating the light at its highest peak. And the solstice comes from like a Latin word that literally means sun standing still. And so we have this Cancer energy piggybacking this almost like the most gorgeous point of who you are, and then you have this like nurturing nourishment wave of support kind of carrying you into the second half of the year, which again brings me back to what I say constantly to my husband. It's all written in the goddamn stars. It is. None of this is a coincidence at all. When you start to align yourself, then you're able to like really fall into the rhythms of nature, which is what all of these ancient mystic traditions teach, is like get in line with the rhythm of nature and the cosmos, and literally everything will fall into place. Which brings us into Saturday. This is all about beauty, comfort, and emotional honesty. The moon will be in Leo, and it will be square Venus and Taurus. Now, Venus and Taurus they thrive together. Venus is the home sign of Taurus, and these are two fixed signs. So Leo and Taurus, we've got a fire sign and an earth sign. Together, they really create tension between inner pride and outer comfort. The moon may crave recognition, while Venus just wants to feel cozy and adored. So this square, and a reminder, square is often a challenge, a space of potential discomfort, but really always remember that these challenges on the other side is growth and expansion. And so this square can really stir feelings of emotional lack, jealousy, or vanity, especially in relationships. And so instead of projecting outward, allow yourself to tune inward. Are you tending to your own emotional and sensual needs, or waiting for someone else to do it? I remember when I got married, one piece of advice that someone told me was, do not let him or expect him to give you the things that you need emotionally and sensually, you need to be in your bubble of love and happiness and let your bubble bump into his bubble. And don't allow him or anyone around you outwardly to validate your worthiness. And I think that's something I still struggle with very much, and a lot of the people that I talk to is that we seek so much validation externally, and that's what this whole week and really this whole month, this whole lunation is about, like you keep saying, turning inward and seeing and validating and giving yourself this sense of worthiness that we've been seeking so much outside of ourselves for.
That just really is, as above, so below, as within, so without. So it's like when you do that work on the internal, that validation and love that you're seeking, you don't need it anymore, but it just comes to you because you're emanating it from within. I love that.
I like that word, emanating. Yeah, and it's all about self-care. It's about indulging in your senses. It's like so Venus, so Taurus. It's about making your space beautiful. It's about wearing something that you love, cooking something that's comforting. And if you don't know what makes you happy, this is a really potent time to start reflecting on what makes you happy. There's so many women that I work with that they're like, I don't even know what I like. I don't even know, what I enjoy doing or eating or wearing because they've just allowed so many other people, whether it's their mother, their partners, their friends, dictate what it is that they like. And I also think it's interesting that it ties back into this Cancer vibe because the Cancer is all about like the maternal. And there's so many of us that are influenced by our own actual mothers, but also other women around us. And it's like, this is a really good time to start to ask yourself, what is it that truly makes me happy? And my Ayurveda teacher, she always says, and I say this all the time, it's like, what is strengthening you and what's weakening you? All the things that are strengthening you, keep them. All the things that are weakening you, start to step away from them so then you can make space for you to see it and understand what makes you happier, brighter, bolder, more courageous, and always walk towards that light. Sometimes I think people confuse others' lights for theirs because they see externally, oh, that person looks happy, but we don't know what's going on inside. And so it's better to just follow your own light as opposed to in the shadow of someone else's.
Comparison is the thief of joy.
Ain't that the truth? All right, sis, round us out for this week. We've got Sunday the 29th.
Sure, this is short and sweet. So the moon is conjuncting Mars in Virgo. Love that. This transit really favors, I want to say, refined action over impulsive reaction. So this is especially relating to work, health, or even service. It's kind of a cosmic nudge to tidy up your emotional act and maybe even your actual space as well.
I love that. How can you simplify? What systems support your emotional well-being, and where can you be more intentional with your energy? That last one cuts deep. Where can you be more intentional with your energy? In Kundalini, they talk a lot about energetic leaks. That's why like Mula Bandh, Uddiyana Bandh, Jalandhara Bandh, these locks of the body that hold the energy in, so then you're not leaking energy. And I think that collectively we're just this kind of like leak of energy, and there's so many more efficient ways that you can spend your energy. I think back to the pool this weekend. I was a bartender for 15 years, and so I'm already, like, my husband always says, you're just so judgmental, and I'm like, I'm not judgmental, I'm observing how more efficient things could run. And so it's this beautiful outdoor bar, there's 4 young guys working the bar, the line is long as fuck, talking 45 watching this just all unfold. And it's these 4 guys, each of them are taking orders verbally, and then they're on top of each other making orders. And then they're all fighting over the POS system, and then they're running the drinks. And I'm thinking, okay, there's so much energy leaked right now. This is so inefficiently run. What is needed? 1 person is running POS, taking orders, ringing people out. 2 people filling the drinks. 1 person running. And how much better that would work, and the line would be moving faster, of which then you'd be making more money. And I think about that as I was driving home yesterday. I had a 3-hour drive, and I kept thinking, where in my life can I be more efficient with my energy? Where am I leaking out? Because it is not something, like the yogis say that you only have a certain amount of breath. And when we breathe short, shallow breaths, our life in turn is short and shallow. When you breathe long, full, big, expansive breaths, then in turn you live a long, full, big, expansive life. And so all of this energy that we're wasting, we don't get it back. It's like this bank account that just keeps deducting down. We can't put more in. And so when you think about it in that way, you go, oh fuck, like I'm literally just lighting fire to $100 bills. And we would never do that to actual money. That literally means nothing. Like money is just something that we created, a concept. It's actually an exchange of energy. And there's so many of us that are losing energy because of the inefficiency of ourselves. And so it just requires us to tune inward. And that's what these new moons are all about. It's a space of slowing down. Literally, the sky is the darkest. So back in the day, it would be incredibly unsafe to go out and hunt and gather because you're putting yourself at risk. There's a huge degree of vulnerability there. And so it's better to stay in and reflect and tune to this inner knowing inside, which is what this whole lunation is all about. So what would you like to leave our listeners with?
I just want to touch on this one more time with the Judgment card and the Neptune Sacrifice card, that again, I really feel like this is just a call for us to kind of reflect on the things that we can let go of in our lives. This is a call to action. It's a call, and I won't say it's action in the physical sense, it's more so in the internal sense. We're being asked, what is it in our lives, in our ways of thinking about ourselves, that we can just let go of, that we can offer up as a sacrifice, so we can make space for something even greater, and make space for a deeper connection with the divine, which in essence is us.
So not to put you on the spot,
Sure.
but what comes to mind for you personally?
I think even getting on this podcast, speaking publicly, starting to teach, that's a huge sacrifice for me. That's a big sacrifice on my ego. So I have to let go of these deep fears and insecurities that I have about doing this in order to move forward.
Do you think that the deep fears are rooted in your like Virgo tendencies of perfection?
Absolutely. And definitely a lot of childhood influence that I had over, I spent a lot of my life being told to be seen and not heard. And really sitting with my emotions alone and not having a way to talk about them. So now in my life, it's funny, I come into these positions where I have no choice but to speak about my emotions, because it's my calling to help other people recognize their own. And the only way I can do that is by doing it myself. And that is my greatest sacrifice.
When you're like, I am thinking back to my very first 200-hour training, and we talked about this last week. I bartender, you have to demand the room and the table and just the whole energy of the space. And it's like, I had no problem doing that, but it's almost like I had this like alter ego that got switched on when I was behind the bar, and it wasn't like, oh, I'm, Mandee Richardson from this tiny little town in Michigan. It was like I was whoever I wanted to be in that moment. And when it got to teacher training, and we're in a circle of like 12 people that are like most supporting and nurturing and like cheerleaders of all time, and when it came to me, I literally froze. I could not speak. And I had all these thoughts in my head that I wanted to share, but I literally just could not get them out. And over time, obviously, I have been able to overcome that. But I think what really changed for me in terms of like teaching and sharing my soul was to like legit just let myself go to this space of vulnerability, like crack the shell and get into the heart and let my heart lead forward. I remember the class where it all changed for me, and it must have been like 8 or 9 years of me like being arrested. And it was like the 8th or 9th anniversary, and really that was like, I kind of equate that as to like the catalyst of my transformation. And I remember driving to the studio, and I was like thinking of all the ways I kind of wanted to weave it into my flow. And I felt like very confident, giving myself a pep talk in the car, like, you got this. And then when I got into class, I could teach the class, but I couldn't like say the things I wanted to say. So at the end of class, like in the cool down, I kept thinking to myself, like, just do it, just do it, just do it. Like, you can do it, just do it. You're gonna be so mad at yourself if you don't. So then I did it, and my voice was cracking the whole time. I definitely wasn't speaking as loud as I had been leading the class in, and I was, fighting back tears, and it was incredibly terrifying and incredibly vulnerable, but I did it. And then the amount of people that reached out, like in person, through messages, through emails, and even to this day, the amount of people that still reference that particular class, of how resonant it was for them on whatever level, whether it was them that went through something similar, or a family member or a friend or whatever, and how thankful that they were for me to share that. And that really was like this awakening moment where I was like, okay, we're all struggling, and we all have this tough exterior that if we can just crack it even a little bit, like Rumi says, the wound is the way. And that is kind of how I feel about this entire lunation, and honestly this entire year with Jupiter in Cancer is like, let's start cracking and letting the light in just a little bit, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, and like let yourself just be vulnerable, and you'll find that you're able to connect with yourself on a much deeper level, and then in turn you'll be able to connect with the world around you on a much more deeper, intimate level.
It's a lot to chew on, and I love it.
Yeah.
Because it's very true, and nothing that is easy is ever as rewarding. That's the thing that Andrew actually always says to me, and that we remind each other of frequently. So even though the most difficult thing can sometimes be to expose yourself, it's also the thing that you need and someone else might need as well.
Mm-hmm. So go off into this week, into this month, and see what it would feel like to lead with the heart first rather than the ego. And really start to embrace this idea of taking your armor off and allowing yourself to be intimate not only with yourself but those around you, creating this sense of home within you and really nurturing and beautifying the space around you. I remember my interior design teacher would say, you know, a cluttered space is a cluttered mind. And so the external is a reflection of the internal and vice versa. So we start to clarify and purify and cleanse inside and outside. And as my yoga teacher said to me many years ago, when your mind, your body, and your soul are in alignment, everything falls into place. And so it is. Thanks, friends. We'll see you next time. You should have grown. It was going really well.
It went really well too. I think